Hello, this presentation is about Civil Air Patrol radio communications procedures and the kind of procedures that mission radio operators need to know. Mission radio operator training goes well beyond ICUT. ICUT is not really mission training, it's a prerequisite, just like first aid is a prerequisite to various mission jobs. ICUT prepared you to speak into a microphone and operate the radio at the introductory level, but this is mission radio operator training, and it prepares you to actually use radios on a CAP mission. For that, we need to know a lot more about radio operating procedures than the ICUT level of experience gives you, and that's what this presentation is about. Here are the SQTR tasks that this presentation addresses. Watching this video is not enough to sign you off on these tasks, but it will help you demonstrate them to a skills evaluator trainer during an exercise participation. So why do we use radios on CAP missions anyway? Everybody has cell phones today, right? Well, the answer is that radios are independent systems. Our repeaters have emergency power, in most cases at least. Radios are battery powered. When commercial communication systems are unavailable, we still need to be able to perform our missions. Cell towers can fall down in a major storm, or maybe something bad happens and everybody's trying to call everybody and we can't get through. So that's why we have our independent communication systems, and that's why we train using them, so we'll be able to use them when the need arises. The bigger the mission, the more different directions our radio communications may need to go. So here's an example. I'm not going to talk about each one of these, but you can see on a major mission how many different entities might be using radios and need to talk to each other. The logical conclusion is that basic intro level is not enough for mission radio operators. CAP radio operators need advanced proficiency and expertise. I've seen beginners with only ICUT get buried rapidly. They don't know what's expected of them on mission for mission communications, and they don't even know exactly what words to use. So we need procedures that are standardized so that anywhere we go in CAP, we can work with members there effectively. South Dakota Wing is not too frequently deployed to other wings, but it's possible. It happens that other wings can be called in when there are earthquakes or major storms. National security might cause us to be working with people from other wings. And certainly at activities like NISA and Cadet Special Activities, encampment, we are there working with people from other wings, certainly. So you'll hear me talking repeatedly today about the need for standardization of procedures and Prowords, the terminology we use to work effectively with other CAP units and with other agencies. Now, I do need to say that there are some interagency protocols in South Dakota that, if we are on the state trunking system, are a little bit different from what I'm talking about today, but that is another level of communications training. On an operational mission, we have essentially two categories of roles: the air crews, ground teams, UAS teams, and radio use around the ICP or base, like flight line marshalers. Those are all tactical users of radio communications. They use radio to communicate, sometimes among themselves and back and forth with who they're working with, like the AOBD or GBD. They report things like their location, their status, any clues or finds. They receive new information instructions from the ICP. The other side of that coin is the mission-based radio station. Its job is sending and receiving. They're on the sending and receiving end of the information that comes from the field crews and teams. And the operators at the mission-based station relay the information to and from the individual ICP staff members involved. The ICP mission-based operators also have to log every communication, so there's a permanent record we can go back and check. But the ICP station is also the net control station. It's responsible for net discipline. What that means is, in effect, they're traffic cops on the radio channel or channels. This might come into play, for example, if somebody is interrupting somebody else, or if they need to wait while you handle more important messages. The critical concept in all of our mission radio communication is to be the most effective and efficient as possible. And we do that by standardizing our terminology, making sure what we say on the air is short and sweet. And one of the main ways we accomplish that is with Prowords, which I mentioned earlier. Prowords are specific words with predefined meanings, and using them promotes brevity of communication. Now, these are not code words. The meaning is plain and easy to figure out, but it's intentionally brief. It complies with the FEMA and NIMS plain text requirements for interoperability communication. We're not allowed to make them up locally, so we only use those that are defined nationally. And CAP Regulation 100-3, radio telephone operations, actually has 47 different pro words. Many of them are related to formal message traffic, which we don't often do on South Dakota Wing missions. So I'm going to focus in the next few moments on those that are most often used in SAR and DR communications. So here are some specific pro words and their meanings. If we say affirmative, yeah, we're saying yes or you are correct. That's, again, fairly easy to understand, but we're less wordy if we just say affirmative. All after means we're asking for a repetition, asking the other station to repeat something or saying, I'm going to repeat something. And typically you would say all after or all before a certain word that you last had correctly. So you might say again, all after rendezvous. And then the rest of the sentence would be repeated so you're sure you have it. You might combine them too. All after such and all before such and such. So you're telling the station to fill in those words in between. The pro word correct obviously means you are correct. You are confirming the accuracy of information, maybe that's repeated back or that's been stated. If you use the word correction, you're saying that an error has been made and you're going to repeat from the last correct word. You're going to omit the incorrect information, go back to where you were correct, and then proceed again from there. Similarly to that, disregard this transmission. That means the information I just gave you was incorrect, so ignore it. If you have numbers or a combination of numbers and letters that need to be combined, and you don't want to just say the word, you want to spell them individually, you might say, you begin it with the word figures. So figures 1, 3, 4, 6. You say the word figures just to make clear to the receiver what's coming next. The pro word I say again means I'm going to repeat that transmission or part of the transmission that you need so that you can double check what I say. If you say I spell, it's kind of like figures. It's before you're going to spell something phonetically. And I'll talk about both how we say figures and how we say phonetics in a little bit here. The pro word read back means I want you to repeat the transmission exactly as you received it. Or it could mean I'm going to repeat the transmission exactly as I received it. Negative means no or not received or information was incorrect. It's the opposite of affirmative, which means you are correct. No play is a word we use particularly on a training exercise if we have a message that is not within the exercise scenario. Let's say that we have come across a traffic accident as we're driving on a ground team sortie, and it's a real accident. It's not part of the training simulation, and we need to call in and get the ICP to call 911, for example. We would preface that with no play. No play. We've come across a traffic accident, need an ambulance, please call 911. And no play, again, signals that this is not an exercise activity. It's the real thing we're talking about here. The pro word nothing heard means that you've tried to call someone and have not received a reply. So you can state for anyone else that might be listening that you've not received a reply call. Out and over, these are two that are kind of hot buttons. Out means this is the end of my transmission and I'm not expecting a reply. Over means this is the end of my transmission. I am expecting a reply. And inexperienced operators will sometimes say over and out. Well, that doesn't make sense, right? To say, I'm not expecting a reply, but now I'm expecting a reply. I'm going to talk about that more in a little bit too. The words radio check mean that you are asking other stations to indicate what your signal quality is. If you receive a call requesting a radio check, and if everything's good, just say Roger, so that we don't use too many words. We don't clog up the signal. If it's not good, you can give a brief signal quality report, signal and strength report, weak, barely readable, something like that. But again, short and sweet responses. Roger is an important word in radio communications. It means I have understood your message. It does not mean yes. It's not an affirmative response, but I've understood your message. Say again means to repeat the indicated portion of a message. And you could combine that with all after, all before. It could ask another station to say again, or you could say yourself, I say again. The pro word "this is" used to identify ourselves when we're calling another station. For example, ground team 1, this is mission base. Wait means I need to pause for a few seconds, just stand by, nobody else transmit, I'll be right back. Wait out means this is going to take a little bit. I'm pausing for more than just a few seconds. I'll call back when I'm ready, and other net operations may proceed if someone else has traffic, but I'll get back to the station I was talking to. Wilco means I have understood your message and will comply. So again, you're not going to say Roger Wilco, because that would be I've understood your message, and will comply. Too complicated. And then if you use the pro word wrong, well, that means that something in the transmission was incorrect, and you would follow it with the correct version. So those are some of the key pro words that I wanted to talk with you about today. I said that we would come back to this question of phonetic alphabet and phonetic numerals. And in Civil Air Patrol, we use the Air Force standard for phonetic spelling. We don't use anybody else's, and I'm not going to talk about each one of these today. But we do have a standard here of what word stands for A, B, C, like that all the way through. And you see it's both a question of emphasis and a question of how many syllables there are. There are one or two of these that might trip you up, like Q. Ordinarily, we would say Quebec, but that doesn't come through too well on the air, so we say Quebec, Quebec. So this is terminology that you should be familiar with. We have similar ways of pronouncing numerals. 0, 1, 2. This one would trip you up. 3, you don't use the th sound at the beginning. It is tree with no H in there. Tree. Again, because the th-re doesn't come through too well, at least if the radio signal is kind of noisy. So those are some of the key pro words and phonetic spelling and numerals that we use regularly in CAP communications. If we're just, traveling from one place to another and talking to someone else, vehicle to vehicle, we wouldn't be this complicated. But on mission communications, where we have to be short and sweet about what we say and promote accuracy, the things we've just talked about are important. I'm going to pause for a moment here. I'll continue in just a moment with part 2 of this presentation. If you need a break, this is a good time to pause the video and take a break, and then come back in a couple of minutes. In part 2 of this presentation, I want to talk with you some more about some of the considerations related to mission radio communications. And first, I want to talk with you more about net control stations. That's the station that's at the ICP that we consider to be the mission base radio station and radio operators. Their purpose is receiving and distributing message traffic in and out of the ICP, information from the units in the field, the air crews, the ground teams, the UAS teams, and providing them to the appropriate ICP staff, or information and directions from the ICP staff to one or more of the individual teams. Maintaining net discipline is important. That means that it is the job of the mission-based radio operators to control the traffic, prioritize who's talking. And sometimes someone's not paying attention and they will interrupt another communication that's in progress. It's the mission base radio operator's job to prioritize and say, you wait out, I'll get back to you. This traffic is already in progress and we'll handle that first. So kind of being the traffic cop there. Logging traffic in WIMRs is important. Get the details down of what communication came in and went out so that we can check back. Sometimes we need a detail a few minutes later, sometimes a few days later, sometimes even weeks later if we have to go back and analyze something about the mission. And then the mission base radio station, the net control station, manages ops normal check-ins. These check-ins are generally initiated by the aircrew, ground team, or EOAS team in the field to report their current status or location. These reports are made for safety reasons so that we know that there's no problems in progress, but also just for mission management so that the appropriate ICP staff members know where the team is, what they're doing, what their status is. Typically, ops normal reports are required based on a schedule set by the net control station or the communications unit leader. But ops normal checks should also be done anytime the reporting station has a status change. For example, we're entering the search grid or we've arrived at the assigned location, that kind of thing. And it's important if you are submitting an ops normal report, don't just say ops normal. That doesn't really tell us anything. Normal, yeah, it means that there's no crisis in progress, but you also need to report where you are and what you're doing. Where doesn't have to be geographic coordinates, but something so that the people at the ICP will know the ballpark of where you are, like near the intersection of Highway 18 and County Road 147. When radio conditions are excellent, the CAP regulations allow what we call abbreviated procedures, which means we don't have to be as rigorous. For example, you may not have to say over or this is in every transmission every time. Note that we always do call the other station first and then give our own call sign or functional designator. It's always the other station and then your designation. So mission nets usually use abbreviated procedures unless signal conditions are bad. But you always need to use proper call signs or functional designators or a functional designator like Mission Base or Ground Team 1. The first time you contact another station, you always do use this is and over. But after that, if we're using abbreviated procedures, we don't have to use that information every time. We don't have to say this is and over every time. Again, remember, call the other station first and then give your own call sign or designator. If the phonetic alphabet and numbers are needed during abbreviated procedures, you only use CAP's version. We don't use somebody else's version. We may omit but not substitute other words for things like over, this is, wait out. And at any time, the net control station, usually at the instructions of the communications unit leader, but the net control station may direct full or abbreviated procedures at any time. Here are some problem areas that we've observed among MROs in mission communication. And these things are things that an MRO evaluator is likely to be looking for. Number one, and we've kind of touched on this, using other words to say what Prowords say. For example, saying yes, no, okay, excellent, did not copy. Those are meanings that are carried by specific Prowords. We should not use alternative wording. Or incorrectly combining them. We've talked about over and out. We've talked about Roger Wilco. Those are not correct to combine them because they contradict each other. A problem area is not paying attention and interrupting someone else. You always listen for a few moments to make sure that the channel is free before you start making a call. It's a problem area if you change radio channels without advising the ICP. It's a problem not knowing how to reestablish communication if you're out of contact. And some examples, maybe you're in a valley or something and you just can't reach the repeater. But if you're using a portable, a handheld to try to talk to the ICP, try using a vehicle radio. It has higher power and a bigger antenna. change locations, find higher ground where you may be able to find an aircraft to relay for you. If you don't check in pretty close to the established ops normal time, the mission base will start getting worried about you and worried if there's a problem. And then that's distracting from the main purpose of the mission. And another problem is lack of clarity in geographic coordinates. The standard for CAP geographical coordinates is to use degrees, minutes, and then decimal points on the minutes. We don't use seconds typically. So an example for CAP is of the CAP standard is north 44 degrees, 14.33 minutes, west 101 degrees, 36.00 minutes. Now, if someone gives you some other format like degrees, minutes, and seconds, as a mission radio operator, you need to make sure that when you write it down and deliver it to the recipient, that what those numbers mean is clear. So you need to make sure it's clear that it's given in degrees, minutes, and seconds rather than minutes with decimal points. Mission radio operators do not themselves translate geographic coordinates formats from one to the other. What you receive starts with either an ICP staff member or the ground, UAS, or aircrew teams, and they have created the numbers to pass to you. But as I said, it's important to relay them clearly and accurately. Even if it's not our official standard, make sure the person receiving the information from you understands what format is being used. Here are some problems for the Incident Command Post Net Control Station. And it's everything I just mentioned, plus the following things here. Being distracted and missing radio calls. I've stood right there at a mission base radio station and heard someone call on the radio, and the mission radio operators didn't notice. And that's bad. You need to be paying attention. Not relaying information completely and accurately. You have to be complete, and that doesn't mean exactly every single word exactly as the other radio operator said it, but you need to give a complete picture of the information you're relaying so that when it's received either by the ICP staff member or received by the radio operator in the field, nothing is lost in the translation, you might say. Getting behind on logging is a problem. If you get behind, it's really hard to get caught up. You need to really stay current on logging as you go along. Another problem is logging messages, but then not telling the ICP staff about the information you've received. It is important to keep the air branch, ground branch director, whoever the appropriate person is, informed of all of the messages that come in. Even if ops normal is nothing out of the ordinary, you still need to provide the information as to where the team is and what they're doing. Not being a good traffic cop, not enforcing the rules as to interruptions and proper other procedures. And then another problem that I've seen often is not having enough operators at the radio station. In even a modest-sized mission, we are likely to have the ground team on one channel, the air crew on a different channel, and you need someone else to do logging, and you need a runner. So that's at least 4 people, if not more, right there. And then you need relief operators, maybe once an hour, the people running the radios need to take a break, and you need someone else to spell them while they take their breaks. So those are some problem areas that I've seen at net control stations at incident command posts. There are also some problem areas that relate to the communications unit leader, and most of that is different training than what we've been talking about before, but of course it overlaps. And for the communications unit leader, the CUL, getting stuck running the radios and not having time to step back and see the big picture can be a problem. On the other hand, not overseeing inexperienced operators, and some need to be told exactly what to say, particularly if it's their first time as a mission radio operator. Not getting an early enough briefing to know what communication resources are needed. Of course, all the radios and antennas we need and all that, that's very intensive as to hardware. And it's not something we can just conjure up out of thin air when we get to a mission location. We need a solid briefing as soon as possible from the incident commander or other senior leadership so we can figure out what resources we need to bring or get someone else to bring or acquire. And I have to say that it's a problem area if you don't fully understand how our radio systems work and their capabilities. If you don't really know how radio works on the different channels we use, how repeaters work, where the repeaters are, what the expected range of the repeater or the ground team vehicle or a radio in the airplanes work, if you don't know how the equipment and experienced radio operator resources are distributed around the state, it's hard to be a good communications unit leader. And the way to gain that knowledge is just to do radio communications a lot, not just a handful of times a year. I also have to tell you that there is a list of prohibited practices in the CAP communications regulation, things we are not supposed to do. And I think I need to address them with you also. It's prohibited to identify operators by name or rank over the air. We don't use name in terms of contacting people. We use their call sign or their functional designator. Personal conversation unrelated to CAP business is not appropriate and is prohibited. That's not likely to happen on a mission, but it's prohibited all the time. Use of any kind of names, nicknames, vanity words in place of authorized call signs or functional designators is prohibited. Excess testing or tuning of radios, particularly when it interferes with other communication in progress. That more relates to first setting up equipment and testing, or sometimes HF radio that we're not talking about today needs more tuning and testing. But basically, anytime you're testing, even if it's just you've installed the radio and you're making sure it works, you need to make sure you're not interrupting someone else. Of course, profanity, obscenity, indecent language is not allowed over the air on the radio, and interruption of any scheduled net activities in progress is prohibited. A few more: transmitting in a directed net without permission of the net control station. You're a ground team and you need to talk to another ground team. Touch base with the net control station first so that they know what you're doing, and they say, no, there's not anything else going on the channel. You're free to do that or to move to another channel. Leaving a directed net without permission, you've checked in and the net control station believes you are there, so you shouldn't turn the radio off or get out of the vehicle without telling them. Now, the exception to that is if it's a real emergency, or sometimes the equipment breaks, or all of a sudden you're in a dead spot. But generally speaking, if you're going to be leaving the channel the net control station is on, you need to tell them and get their okay. And then use of locally created Prowords. We've talked about several Prowords that have standard meanings today, but we can't make up our own, or use agency codes like law enforcement 10 codes or signal codes. Amateur radio has what they call Q codes. We don't use those or any other shorthand terminology not formally established as standard CAP procedure. So kind of the takeaway from the presentation today is that use of these standard procedures enhances both the efficiency and the effectiveness of CAP's radio communications. They are the professional way to communicate, and we need to work that way. All MROs should employ these basic operating procedures we've talked about, and all net control station operators should employ, yes, the basic operating procedures, plus the additional things we've talked about, like net discipline procedures. So that is our presentation today, some of the basics that will help you be ready for your exercise participation as mission radio operator and for NSET to check off your skills as having accomplished them. Good luck with your radio training and your future radio communications.